GTM engineers are already being replaced unless they can actually build. And there's a debate happening in B2B right now, and it's about a job title that barely existed a few years ago. That's GTM engineer. On one side, you've got people saying the role's overhyped. That's just a fancy title. And for someone who knows Clay, writes AI prompts, connects a few tools together. And Hayes Davis actually made an argument in his 2026 GTM predictions. He said, we may need to start talking about these star engineers, GTM engineers, forward deployed engineers, all of it, because these titles usually show up when technology is still messy and complicated. And then as tools mature, the specialist role becomes less necessary. And honestly, the guy has a point, but on the other side, the data says something different. The 2026 State of GTM Engineering report surveyed 228 GTM engineers across more than 30 countries. It found that US median compensation is around 135K. 72% report direct revenue impact, 84% use Clay. Coding skills create a meaningful compensation on premium, and companies are still hiring for this kind of work. Right now, OpenAI has got a product engineer, GTM, and innovation role listed at 235K to 385K plus equity. So who's right? Is the GTM engineer role already dying, or is it becoming one of the most valuable roles in modern revenue teams? I'm Bruce Martin. I build GTM systems, outbound automation, enrichment workflows, AI-assisted prospecting, trigger-based campaigns, Clay, HeyReach, CRM automations, signal-based outreach, signal stacking, the whole stack. And my take is really simple. The title, GTM engineer, might change, but the work is not going to go away. But there's a catch. If you're just a tool operator, you, my friend, are in trouble. If you can actually build revenue systems, this might be one of the best career opportunities in B2B right now. So let's start with a case against the role, because it's not a stupid argument. Hayes Davis compared GTM engineers to web developers in the early 2000s. Back then, building an e-com site required big teams, expensive projects. It was a lot of technical overhead. Today, your cousin can launch a decent Shopify store in an evening. And his point is that every new technology goes through this life cycle. First, then specialists appear, then the tools get easier, and then the role gets compressed. And that's the argument against GTM engineering. And honestly, I think this is where a lot of GTM engineers need to be careful, because some of the criticism is well-deserved. There are people calling themselves GTM engineers who are really just Clay operators. They know how to build a table. They know how to enrich leads. They know how to generate AI first lines, or maybe even entire emails that are AI generated, but they don't understand things like positioning. They don't understand sales psychology. They don't understand data quality. They don't understand signal stacking and deliverability. They don't understand pipeline economics. They don't understand why a campaign works, or even why it fails. And if that's the version of GTM engineering you're talking about, then yes, that version is going to get commoditized and it's going to die. The GTM engineering report basically shows the split already. Low-code operators get 90K, mid-level around $105,000. And high-code GTM engineers, people using Python, JavaScript, SQL, APIs, data pipelines, and AI coding tools, are closer to the 135K median compensation. This tells you something really important. The market is already separating tool users from builders, and that's the real story. Not is GTM engineering dead. The better question is, which version of GTM engineering is dead? Because the version that only depends on tool knowledge, that fragile version, that's not going to survive. Clay makes the workflow easier. You lose leverage. If HubSpot adds native AI enrichment, you lose leverage. If Apollo instantly, SmartLead, Salesforce, HubSpot, any of the platforms use that workflow, you lose leverage. If AI agents can build the workflow for you, you lose leverage. So the critics are not completely wrong. The tool-only GTM engineer is exposed. But that's not the same as saying the work disappears. Now, here's the other side. The reason this role exists is not because people love job title inflation, even though they probably do. It exists because GTM became too complex for the old operating model. Modern outbound is no longer about buying a list, uploading to sales, Loft, Salesforce, send a sequence. That game is dying if it's not dead already. And today, good outbound requires signals. You need to know who's hiring, who has raised funding, who has changed jobs, who is hiring for multiple roles, who installed a tool, who's showing intent, how these signals stack, who has a broken workflow, who has a trigger that actually creates urgency. And once you have that, then you need enrichment, and then you need validation, and then you need segmentation, and then you need personalization, and then routing, and then sequencing, and then CRM hygiene, then attribution, then feedback loops, then reporting, then iteration. I'm not done. That is not a simple SDR workflow anymore. That is a system, and most companies don't have anyone that actually owns that system. Sales doesn't own it. Not end-to-end. Marketing definitely doesn't own it. RevOps maybe owns pieces of it, but often not the build layer. Data teams don't want to touch it. And engineering usually has a much bigger product priority. So what happens? A new role appears, like this one. Someone who understands GTM strategy, but can also build. Someone who can talk revenue to leadership, but also write scripts. Someone who can think in ICPs, signals, data models, automations, APIs, pipeline, outcomes. That is the GTM engineer, and the data that supports this is becoming a real function. The State of GTM Engineering report found that 72% of GTM engineers report direct revenue impact. It also showed that compensation climbs materially when the person has technical depth. That's the important part. It's not the title, it is the impact. Because companies do not care what you call yourself if you can build a system that creates pipeline for them. And that's why I think the GTM engineer is dead argument misses something. The tools will get easier. And yes, some workflows will eventually become templates. We've seen this play over and over and over again. Enrichment and sequencing becomes commoditized, but the strategic layer, that will not. The ability to design a system still matters. The ability to know what signals still matters. That matters. The ability to debug why a campaign is not converting still matters. The ability to connect data, messaging, timing, and automation, that still matters. And that is not going away. Here's my take as someone who's actually doing this work day to day. GTM engineering is not one role. It's sort of splitting into two roles. The first is the tool operator. This person knows Clay. They know how to connect tools. They know how to run enrichments. They know how to use templates. They can build workflows. If the path is obvious, that person can be useful, probably replaceable with a VA. Because when the tool gets easier, the value goes down. The second is the revenue systems builder. This person thinks differently. They don't just ask, how do I build this in Clay? They ask, should the system exist at all? What signal predicts buying intent? What data do we need? How do we stack this data? What's the failure point? How do these systems speak to each other? Where does the workflow break? What should be automated? How do we combine intent with our signal ingestion system? What does sales need to see? How do we measure revenue impact? You see, this is a very, very different person. That person is not just operating tools. They are designing revenue infrastructure. And that's sort of where the opportunity really is, because the value of a GTM engineer was never really the tools. It should have never been the tools. It was always the thinking. Anyone can learn to build a Clay table, but can you look at a company's ICP and figure out which accounts are worth targeting? Can you design enrichment waterfall that doesn't burn budget on bad data? Can you write messaging that doesn't sound like every other AI-generated cold email? And can you create a workflow that finds the right person, enriches the right data with the right message at the right time and through the right channels, and then reports back on what happened, and then have that system improve over time? That is the job. It's not the Clay table. It is the system. And this is why I think Hayes Davis is both right and wrong. He's right that some engineer title. He's right that some engineer titles are a response to complexity. When a tool category is new, people need specialists. Then the tools mature. That's when the easy work gets abstracted away. That will happen. But Shopify didn't kill web developers. It killed basic website builders. The good developers, what happened to them? They moved up the stack. They became full stack engineers. They became product engineers, they became architects, they became CTOs, they became heads of development. And the same thing is going to happen here. Clay operators will get commoditized. Revenue system builders, these are the ones that are going to move up the stack. That's the distinction. And that's why my thesis is not GTM engineering will live forever. My thesis is the title may fade, but the capability will become core. It always has been core. If you're an SDR, here's what this means. Your job's changing. I'm not saying if every SDR disappears, but the SDR who only sends emails, makes calls, and follows a sequence, isn't it? That guy's in a dangerous position because more of that work is becoming automated. The SDR who survives is the one who becomes more technical. Learn Clay, learn enrichment, learn basic automation, learn how APIs work. You don't need to become a developer, but you need to learn a little bit about prompt design, deliverability, how your data flows. The system, the sales system that your business operates in, you don't need to become a software engineer at all. But you do need to stop thinking of yourself as only a rep. The SDR of the future is part seller, part researcher, part systems builder. The people who learn that, they're going to move up. The people who don't are going to be managed by systems that they don't understand. If you're a founder or a revenue leader, here's my advice. Don't hire a GTM engineer just because someone is good at Clay. That's never going to be enough. You want someone who understands your market. You want someone who understands your ICP, your sales cycle, your data, your GTM motion, your constraints, your offer, your messaging, your pipeline economics, your signals. The tools are the easy part. The thinking, that's the part that's hard. A weak GTM engineer just builds automations that create noise. A strong GTM engineer builds systems that create leverage. There's a big difference between those two. So when you hire for this role, don't only ask, what tools do you know? The question you should be asking is, what pipeline have you created? What systems have you built? What broke? Because all systems break. What did you learn? How did you measure success? How did you fix the broken system? How did sales use your output? What did you automate? What did you deliberately keep manual? That's important. That's how you separate tool operators from actual builders. And if you already call yourself a GTM engineer, here's the uncomfortable truth. Your title is just not enough. Your Clay screenshots, not enough. Workflow diagrams, again, not enough. Your AI outbound system is not enough. You need to own outcomes. You need to own pipeline, revenue, conversion, speed, efficiency, data quality, reply quality, meeting quality, sales adoption, sales velocity. That's where the value is. So stop positioning yourself as, I'm good at Clay. Start positioning yourself as, I build revenue systems. That means learning the technical side, or at least the architecture of the technical side. A little bit of Python, JavaScript. You don't need to learn how to do all of those things. You do need to learn how these systems, why these systems speak to each other, and what are the constraints. You don't need to know everything. Just understand how they work. Be a little bit more technical than you think you are right now, because GTM engineers who can only configure tools, that you're going to get squeezed. The GTM engineers who can build beyond the tool, those are the ones that are going to get paid. That split is already showing up in compensation data. Coding skills, they're producing a meaningful premium. High-code GTM engineers are already in a different category from low-code operators. So is the GTM engineer all dead? No, it's not. But the shallow version is, the title might change. The hype might cool down. The tools, they're always going to get easier. But the work, building systems that turn data, signals, messaging, and automation into revenue, that's not going to go away. That work is becoming more and more important. So here's the cleanest way I can put it. Tool operators are replaceable. Revenue system builders are not. That's the future of GTM engineering, and that's the side I'm betting on. I am Bruce Martin. I build these systems, test them in the real world, and share what actually works. Next time, I'm going to break down why most AI outbound is broken, how to stack these signals and actually get positive replies in 2026. No theory, just real campaign data. See you on the next one.